3 hours later. While I was recording these events, various people came and went. At times, entire families made their way out of the city and stood for a while watching and talking, and they then returned. I looked around me. All the opposition spirits had arrived. Among them were many who are familiar to me. I'd worked with them before they gave up on love and went their own way. These dark spirits were far outnumbered by the assembled ranks of heaven. Every single spirit who serves my boss in this universe had also made their way to the little hillock of Calvary to be with their master as the light of his life slowly faded. Lucifer surveyed the gathered angels nervously, knowing that he would stand no chance if the fury of heaven should turn against him. He did not understand that the fury of heaven was aimed at a different target. Martha and Mary were there. They'd walked down from Bethany at the news of Jesus' execution, and a number of other women who had travelled with Jesus from Galilee. Nearer to the 3 crosses were John, the brother of James, and Mary from Magdala, who Jesus met at Matthew's party. Behind them I noticed my colleague, Maff, and knew that Jesus' mother could not be far away. Yes, Mary was huddled in a thick shawl as close to her son as the soldiers would allow. The sadness of her soul was so profound that it was painful to observe. To her mind, the entire universe was emptying and on the brink of destruction. Still we waited. Jesus was fading, his breath shallow. He was only occasionally conscious now. Then my boss appeared. A wave of terror rippled through the opposition, matched by a ray of hope in the spirits of heaven. The thick fog in Jesus' mind cleared, and he looked into the eyes of his Father. His thoughts did not match the glimmering hopes of the angels. They echoed the sheer terror of the opposition. This was what Jesus most feared. This is what had reduced him to cold sweat and hot tears in the Garden of Gethsemane. In his Father's face he did not see love, but only pure anger. The utter hatred of every rebellious act and every selfish thought amassed by generation after generation of human beings across the world. "My God," Jesus begged, "my God." He fought for breath, desperate to cling to the love and mercy that he remembered in his dad. Then my boss turned his back on his son. And to the absolute horror of the hosts of heaven, he left. A roar of celebration swept up from the opposition. Jesus' body slumped, hanging by the nails in his wrists, crying out in his total loneliness, "Why have you abandoned me?" Lucifer anticipated that the end was near. He picked up a group of close supporters and assembled them at the foot of Jesus' cross. The hosts of heaven looked on in paralysed silence. John joined Mary and helped her to her feet. Jesus began to gather breaths, building up for strength for one last cry. He raised his head, looking beyond his enemies, beyond his mother and his closest human friend, beyond the millions of angels who longed to save him. He looked into the emptiness beyond and shouted as loud as he was able, "My Father, I leave my spirit in your hands." That was his last breath. The light of his life went out, and his defeated spirit slid from its body. Lucifer was there to catch it, but there was no triumphant shout from the opposition. I imagined that they too were overwhelmed by the enormity of what had just happened. Lucifer held tightly to his prize. His followers closed around their leader as he carried his limp quarry away. They passed in front of Michael and myself and stopped. Whereas all human spirits are bound by the ties of their myriad selfish activities, the Son was ensnared in every crime and callousness that has ever been known in all humanity's sorry history. He had been weighed in my boss's scales and found wanting. Lucifer said nothing. He simply looked at me. There was no smile on his face, no mockery in his eyes. It was almost as though he was waiting for my permission for him to continue. I stared back, too numb to respond, as the leader of the opposition carried my master away to the place where he stores all the human dead to death. The whole company of rebel spirits followed. When they were gone, I could see that the centurion was once again standing by Jesus' cross. He was oblivious to the spiritual drama that had just taken place around him, his gaze fixed on Jesus' disfigured corpse. "Surely," he said, turning to Mary and John, "this man was God's son." I couldn't bear to stay any longer, and I did not have the courage to turn and face the devastated angels behind me. I returned to my office, relieved to be away from that dreadful place, my spirit heavier than it has ever been. I have done what my boss required of me. I have kept to his every instruction. What he planned has happened. But I do not feel any satisfaction. He risked everything for the sake of humanity. And it seems to me that everything has been lost. Away from earth in timeless heaven. I sat in my office, lost in thoughtlessness. A stream of solemn angels drifted past my door. They were making their way to the gathering place where our boss assembles us at moments of great importance. On this occasion, though, there had been no instruction to gather, no word at all from our boss. It seemed that in such extreme circumstances there was nothing else for the angels of heaven to do but to be together in the home of our Creator and Master. Gabriel silently slipped into my room, his spirit as dull as my own. "You will have to talk to them," he commented after a while. A spark of anger flashed across my mind. "You do it," I retaliated. "You're the great messenger." He absorbed my aggression without responding. Before long, both Michael and Raphael had joined us. None of us spoke, our spirits empty. There was nothing to say. I found myself being irritated by all three of them. Age-old niggles returned, my jealousy of Gabriel, my impatience with Raphael, my distrust of Michael. The love that used to flow so effortlessly from my angelic being seemed to have vanished. At last, Gabriel spoke. He looked directly at me and said, "It has to be you." Together we made our way to the place where all of heaven was assembled, but heaven felt very empty. Millions of angels looked forlornly to me for some explanation, yet I had little I could tell them. It is not possible to express the subtle themes of angelic discussions in crude words. It would be better represented in the complex harmonies of your world's greatest orchestras. But these words will give you some flavour of the message. My fellow servants, it is true. The one who is the source of all our music has been carried off to the place of utter silence. His song was sung exactly as he chose. It is not yet completed. I walked out. On the way back to my office, I passed my boss's door. I stopped and knocked. There was no reply. I knew that there would be no reply, but I knocked again and again and again, and soon I was hammering on his door with all my energy, shouting, "I don't like this. I don't like this at all." Raphael found me and guided me gently back to my room, where he stayed with me.